So how did you get out there 13 years ago?
I actually came to teach English, and when finding an English teaching job was really hard to get, I met another American who was starting a coffee company, and so I joined up with him. And since then, he's left the company, so now I'm running it on my own.
So tell me more about that. How do you do that? How do you source? Like, what is your structure?
Um, so one of the things I've been fascinated by in listening to the podcast and listening to other producers is how different coffee is done in different areas of the world. It's so massively different. So we're a processor, but we don't have any trees of our own. So we buy from small farmers. We have a buying station in the mountains where we buy from anybody who's willing to bring us red cherry, and we take it from cherry to green bean, specialty green bean. So we're everything between the farmer and the roaster. But we don't have any farm of our own, any trees of our own. We've generally bought only cherry, but this year we started buying the parchment that is generally sold here, the parchment at 30% that's been washed by farmers, trying to figure out if that, since that's the vast majority of what coffee is in Indonesia, that's the systems that are in place. And it's kind of hard to figure out what to do when you're getting parchment that's already been washed at questionable quality. Picking questionable quality, like what can you do from that point to raise the quality? Because trying to switch the system with hundreds of small farmers is really swimming upstream. So we're working to get people to pick ripe cherry and get us cherry as our primary thing, but also looking to find ways to increase the quality of the parchment that we can also get kind of a lower specialty product out of that.
Can you give me an idea of your volumes? Like, how many exportable bags are you talking about?
Um, we're at this year was 5 tons
Okay.
of green. We're set up to do 15, probably 20 tons of green if we could get the cherry. That's the main issue has been sorting good quality cherry or good quality coffee at scale. It's just the logistics of it are really, really complicated here. And we've had 4 consecutive really bad harvests, which is just made that continue to be the biggest issue.
So it's interesting that Lowell just showed up because I was going to mention him to you anyway because he's also an aggregator of a lot of different producers, and in other he's in Honduras and we usually do the morning sessions with him, and he was sharing that one of the things that he prefers is to actually get the coffee wetter, get it, buy it at 15% and finish the drying himself because that's such a critical point where you can lose a lot of quality. So if you're getting the coffee at 30%, it's different because it's already been hulled, right? It's the wet hold is what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
So,
No, it's still parchment.
oh, okay.
So the main system here is they sell parchment by the liter. It's at about 30%. So the farmer, they pulp it, they wash it, they'll dry it for a day or two until it's sort of stable, and then they'll sell it to the next person down the chain. They will either dry it for a day or wet hull it right away and finish drying in a day or two. So we're just pulling it out of the wet hull before the wet hulling happens. And then we're drying it on raised beds in parchment from that point. The problem is while the coffee quality is still good, so cupping it next to our honey that came from ripe cherry, followed all the good processes and has done well in Cup of Excellence and stuff like that. They're very, very, very similar quality. But as soon as somebody knows it came from parchment from a farmer, they're not willing to pay a higher price, even though the actual quality of the coffee is very, very similar.
And so how do they find out? Is that something that you have to disclose? Or do they just, is there some other way that
It's
they know?
something No, in conversation, we've always made a big part of our business is transparency. So when they say what process is this, I'm going to tell them what process it is.
Mm-hmm.
But in sending it around to some Q graders to get their opinions, because I was cupping it and I was like, this can't be this good, because the origins were not nearly as good as ours, and yet it's coming out. I feel like it's great. And so I sent this to a number of Q graders, and labeled it not with the process, but with the name of the person I bought it from, and got their feedback, especially a blind cupping where I had roasted with Arakawa to give them roasted samples, so they didn't know what they were cupping other than what's in the cup.
Mm-hmm.
And the feedback was great. But then as soon as you start talking about what the process was, suddenly they're like, oh yeah, I did feel like there was something in there. It's like, you
Yeah.
didn't say that until you knew what it was. So just dealing with some of the bias that comes in with our brain and our tongue connection that your tongue doesn't pick up without that.
Do you have any opportunity to blend? Like if those two qualities are really similar to what you already have, can you incorporate their coffees into yours and just sell it as one umbrella?
I could, but then that would get back into the transparency on the process and all that. And the value on processing a honey process or a natural that we do is they pay far more locally for it because it's a different process, even if it doesn't taste different. So it's a challenge to figure out. I think basically my current model is I think the high quality wash stuff that I'm getting from Parchment, I think I can export that because it's a high quality Sulawesi washed coffee. It tastes great. It's just not valued here because it's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has something that's similar. So I need to get that exported to somebody who will value the origin and profile, whereas local market will pay a lot for processing differences, not necessarily flavor differences.
Okay, so is most of your sales local market?
Yeah, so Indonesia specifically, the export market is not the internal market is actually higher generally than export market for specialty.
Okay.
I can get more money here than I can exporting it. It's just the volumes you couldn't do 20 tons of specialty here, but I can easily sell 7 tons of specialty here for a higher price than export.
And can you share those prices, like dollars per pound or kilos or?
Ooh, dollars per pound. Our honey this year landed in the U.S. was going to be about 6.30 a pound. Um, yeah, I struggled to do the dollar per pound conversion because we very rarely do that. So I know rupiah per kilo. Those numbers I have down, but then you got to do multiple conversions to get to dollar to pound. But yeah, we're in the around the $6 a pound for our specialty, and then the washed was around 4.50 a pound. Uh, so yeah.
And but that's not as good as what you get locally, is what you're saying?
For that's basically what we do for export is we just put our local price and then you add all the logistics onto it.
Okay, so there's
Um,
not a different price. It's just
so
it's more because there's more
we're not
steps.
getting a different price,
Okay.
but I think we could conceivably get a better margin on the wash stuff. That our margins here are super tight on the parchment coffee that we're buying.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you export it, it has a different value proposition because it's a unique origin of good quality. So you could actually get a slightly higher margin for the US market from the parchment as opposed to doing specialty to the US, which is not as unique there. Or there's not the value proposition to have the price that higher that they would be willing to pay here.
Got it. Thank you for indulging my questions. Since we have a few more people on, I'm going to, if anyone
Yes.
else has something else that they want to jump in or ask a question, otherwise, I'm going to keep picking on David because I like learning more about regions that I know very little about. So, Martin, you turned on your camera early. Was there something that you wanted to say or just say hi?
Yeah, just say hi. Hello, everybody. I think earlier when there was just a few of us, you had asked where we were at.
Mm-hmm.
And so, David, funny that you say American living in Indonesia. I'm actually an Ecuadorian living in the States right now. Uh, and so, yeah, but with my family, have a coffee farm in Ecuador. So we are coffee producers from Ecuador.
And what state are you in?
Right now, I am in Massachusetts.
So, how do you travel back and forth, or do you help your
Mhm.
family
Yep.
virtually?
Both travel back and forth, and um, help them out virtually too. My parents oversee the logistics, the things at the farm. I think I had mentioned in our last conversation that coffee is one of the things that we do at the farm. But yeah, so we have a team at the farm too, and then we've been kind of branching out for the last few years, trying to add a little bit more value to the coffee that we produce, and so we've been working with a company in Ecuador that they're producers, but they're also exporters. So we like hire their services to export the coffee here to the states, and then we have um, I have a partnership with a roaster here in the states. So I do my storage of coffee here in the states, and I do roasting of our own coffee here. We try to like go directly to the final consumer of the roasted coffee that we produce here at the farm.
Very cool. Do you mostly sell like direct to consumer, or are you in coffee shops? How does that work?
It's mostly direct to consumer. We have a website, and then we have a few roasters throughout the United States that buy green coffee from us, and they so that's those are the two channels. But we've been mostly focusing on direct consumer, not a whole lot of retail, and we don't do wholesale.
Cool. Did you have a question?
No, personally, I didn't. No,
Cool. Thanks for saying hi. Well, in
thank
that
you.
case, I'm going to jump over to Lowell. And I don't know if you heard the earlier part of our conversation where David is getting coffee at 30% moisture and trying to do what he can to improve the quality from that point towards the end, seeing it again as a challenge. And I had mentioned that you kind of prefer that. You would prefer to dry the coffee yourself in a controlled environment versus accepting much drier coffee. So I don't know if you wanted to share anything about that and your experience kind of drying those coffees or how you approach your relationships with the producers, farmers.
Yeah, I think when you're buying from many different farmers, the where you can end up with inconsistency is in the drying, and because they're probably all doing the same thing in terms of quality of the cherry pick and quality of the depulping and fermenting. They're probably all following a very similar protocol. If I had the we buy at 15% mostly because we don't have the logistics to dry the coffee. So I think if I were to improve on drying, it would be nice to have some kind of mechanical system and then buy coffee. Here we call it wet parchment, humidor, and it's the same thing. It's maybe dried for a day, so the moisture's in the 40%. The only my question would be if you're trying to make that coffee, trying to differentiate that coffee. I wonder how much access do you have to the farmers? Are they in a position where you have access to those farmers who are picking the cherry and processing the cherry, where they might be able to be, taking pictures of the cherry that they're picking, or that you can convince them to do a cherry sort before they depulp, and little things like that, so that you have a little more traceability back to the farmer, which would distinguish it from other wet parchment coffees. I know I've seen, I don't remember what origin it is, but they, these things they say like triple picked, which basically they're suggesting that there's more sorting in the coffee going on at the cherry level. I think, they pick the cherry and then they sort the cherry. I'm wondering if you were able to work directly with farmers, you still want them to do the work because you don't have the logistics to be depulping all of this and potentially, but you could have those that extra information that might differentiate it from other coffee, and then suggesting why the coffee's better. Or it might even actually improve. You can get them to do a sort before they depulp. At least your yields might improve. I
David?
don't have a question.
No, I know I picked on you.
Yeah, the the logistical challenge, a big part of it is, so we live at the base of the mountains. We're actually almost at sea level, which makes drying easy in some ways, but hard to control the temperature side of it. But we get lots of sun and we can do a lot of things with it. But as soon as you get up into the mountains, there's no cell phone coverage. It's about a 3 hour off-road motorcycle ride up to the farm areas. So there's almost no way to consistently communicate with people there. And the one of the challenges specifically within the Indonesian market is consistency and quality is not a cultural value. And so that's actually one of the things that makes running a specialty coffee company here easier, because that's what I bring to the table. It's keeping specific standards at the standards. One of the wonderful things about Indonesian culture is they're very, very forgiving when your quality is not as high as they would like. Like if you're trying to help your neighbor and you can't do as good as they would like, there's never going to be an issue. They just accept you for what you are, but they also accept their coffee for whatever it is. And so it's really hard to have other people keep your standards. You can maybe do that in a 6 month, like a 1 year, 2 year, but over time, the entire cultural force is just, it's okay. It's okay. That's good enough. That's good enough. And so it's a challenge to get some kind of consistent quality. So actually, where I've been going with what Lowell said is, I'm actually going to be pushing much harder to get people to bring me cherry next year. So that's one of the reasons originally, instead of buying parchment, just walking into the parchment market, when we first got here, we said, we'll take cherry and then we can make sure it's ripe. If we need to sort the cherry ourselves at that point. So we have an abundance of labor, we can do that. But if you can get me the cherry, I can do a lot of things with cherry. But if you're getting me the parchment, it's hard to know what I can do from that point. And for the most part, as long as you're willing to pay them well for the cherry, they're happy to give you the cherry, because that saves them a day of hand pulping, a day of washing, a day of trying to dry it where there's very little sun. So at our buying station where we buy almost all of our cherry, they absolutely love that we buy cherry instead of making them do all the work, because there's a labor shortage during the harvest season. They don't have the time to be doing all of the processing of the cherry. They would love to just pick it, bring it, weigh it, and get back out tomorrow and pick more. So I'm moving more towards, if I can get that system into place, where if they can bring me the cherry, I can pay them more money for it because I can get a better margin, but it also saves them 2 days of work for every day of every 2 days of picking. So that seems like the better way forward. But there will always be a good number of people who are doing the parchment for wet hulled. And if I can get them a decent price for the higher quality stuff, then I think generally that'll go to the US market. But I think, yeah, everything you were saying, Lowell, is stuff that we're thinking and considering and trying to figure out how to implement those things.
I want to jump in.
The culture in Honduras is similar. It's like you put your head down, get it done, and so it's the crazy middlemen that sweat the details. One other suggestion I've also thought about buying cherry, that dump truck that you use to bring it down, I don't know how many kilometers it is, but you call that a bioreactor, so that that cherry is being macerated in a bioreactor with a certain frequency of vibration, right? And yeah, and maybe you seal it somewhere so you can throw in anaerobic. But
but if you don't seal it, then you can claim you're using all of the different yeasts along each kilometer of the road. Like the natural yeast, it's an aggregation of all of the potential yeasts from a 40-kilometer. Yeah, we can play with the terminology to make it perfect.
And then when they fix the road and there's less agitation and the bouncing down the road and the quality drops off, you'll be like, well, see, it mattered.
What I want to jump in about, David, is you're kind of blowing my mind with the idea that consistent quality is not a value, that's so foreign for my American mind. Because for me, yeah, consistency is a high value. So if that isn't, and I understand having other values like community and the benefits of like harmony when you have so many people living in such close quarters, but what replaces that then? Like, if consistent quality doesn't matter, what does matter?
What matters is relationships with everybody else. That's the priority. So we will make up if the quality's not good enough for something, we'll work together. We'll find a way to make it good enough, or we'll cover for each other's lacks. It's entirely a relational culture, but it actually I've done a lot of thinking about this. It's the difference between the cold cultures and the warm cultures. So cultures that are in cold environments, there's a high value on needing to plan ahead for the winter. You have to plant now, thinking what you're going to need later. If you think of the tropical island, like the laid back island life, it's because there are no seasons for fruit. There's always fruit. There's always fish. So you don't have to have all of these very strict, specific standards for how to do everything. You can just there's always enough. So the value is there's always enough. We don't have to prepare. We don't have to keep everything perfect. We just hang out with each other and enjoy each other. And as long as the community is happy with each other, that's where actually the bigger issue comes. Nobody's going to starve, but there might be issues within the community. So the value shifted to let's make sure the community loves one another, cares for one another, that everything's good here because food's not an issue. It grows on its own. Like everything here is edible and it is always growing. So there's never been a value of you need to follow certain things. Otherwise you're going to starve in the winter. There's nothing like that. So I think it's just a contextual difference.
I think that's a really great way to think about it, kind of paradigm of cold and warm cultures. There's another one that I heard about recently that was coconut cultures versus peach. So, for example, Americans are a peach culture where they're very friendly. People say hi to each other. In general, like you always say, like, "Hey, good morning." They're very, very friendly, and so the outside is soft and very like congenial, but getting to the core and really getting to know people and having those close friendships takes a long time. And the opposite is the coconut culture, which is more like the French, where they're very like, much more reserved and can be very rude appearing. But if you go past that initial superficial shell, they're very soft on the inside. And once you get in with some of those cultures, you're in the soft, gooey center. So I love thinking about these differences in culture because like you said, most of your business is local. So you have learned a certain system and you can navigate that system. But when you have to deal with 5 different export countries with their own values and all of their own, like you can very easily offend somebody and you have no idea that someone's so upset because you did something completely opposite to their culture. So it's just, I have this conversation with Nick all the time. I'm like, I don't know how anything gets done. Like just with our own egos and just all the challenges we have communicating in our own cultures. And now we have to go to like 10 different cultures and try to do business. And it's a miracle that things happen.
Something else I've noticed is rural culture versus urban culture. And I think, the middleman tends to be from the, slightly more urban culture and the farmers tend to be from the more rural. And so there tends to be different ways of viewing how things get done, or a disconnect there sometimes that I've noticed. I'm one of the rare middlemen that actually lives in the community where we buy coffee. So there's days where I wish I was an hour away, right? Because I wish I was a little less accessible.
That's fair. I'm going to give a chance for anybody else that wants to jump in or anybody new that joined us more recently. So hi, Nelson, Emmanuel. Micah, did you want to say hi?
So I'm also an Indonesia producer. Hi, David. Nice to meet you. Talking about consistency, there's 2 type of roaster in here. The one who sell the origin and the one who really love the consistency. So I'm the one who provide for the consistency. I work at Aceh, West Java, near Bandung. The city that I'm working on is at Bogor, if you ever heard of it. and also in Sulawesi, Center Sulawesi at Sigi. So I'm trying to make a lot of batch this year to sell to the roaster that love the consistency. And talking about the protocol that you use for the washed parchment, I've been there too, and and it's really hard to increase the cup quality when it's already washed parchment. So a lot of people at Aceh do the infusion at their washed parchment. So they dry it until I think it's 15 to 20% moisture, and they rehydrate with the mango juice, yeah, a lot of fruit juice, and they sell it with a higher price. But they export it to Japan or Korea, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it's really hard to sell infused coffee in Indonesia because of the low capital problem in here. People can't buy coffee more than like 250k rupiah. I think it's around $150. Yeah, $115, I guess. Yeah, $15. So they can't afford it, especially for the specialty coffee in here. But there's also a roaster that really love origin, so they don't really care about the cup quality. If it's from Sulawesi, they just buy it. They just really love Sulawesi coffee. And I also have those type of customer, and I really love them because they don't really think a lot. They just want to hear the story from the farmer. They really want to build the community, and that's the thing that I also love about Indonesian in coffee industry. We grow a lot because of those type of people. Those type of people really love to see how much farmer can grow, how the family impacted by the coffee, and they they're trying to buy not just the coffee. Sometimes they buy another local commodity like cocoa, family, and yeah, that's the thing that I really love about Indonesian coffee industry. We don't really just sell coffee to live, but we also sell another community.
That's great. And I think that that's the power of having a brand. Like Sulawesi is a brand of just I know it's something easy that people can like hold on to and say I want that and can ask very few questions. You said Bogor, and that threw up a flag in my head. I was like, why do I know that name? And it was because when Nick and I were in Jakarta, there's a botanical garden there, and we love gardens. So we wanted to go see that botanical garden. So we got in a car and drove for like an hour and a half, 2 hours in traffic. The taxi dropped us off, and we checked that the botanical garden was open, and it said it was, but there was some special event, like
It was a diplomatic visitor.
a diplomat was visiting, and so they had everything shut down. So we like had said goodbye to our taxi. We were like in front of the gates, and it was just completely locked. So we like walked around the botanical gardens because there's like some fence. So we were just like peeking in through the bars and seeing how beautiful it looked. And then we just got in a car and left and drove 2 hours back to Jakarta. It was such a bummer, but it looked really beautiful. So next time.
The botanical garden is at the presidential office, so it's really hard to access that. I mean, it's for public, but our government doesn't really tell us when they have meeting at it. So a lot of people come, especially tourists, to see the botanical garden, but when they already there, just like you can't go in because there's someone there
Yeah.
trying to meet our president. So yeah, that thing happened a lot. I'm so sorry for that. But yeah, that thing happened a lot.
We were so sad because we love gardens. So yeah, we didn't get a chance to visit. Oh, I remember. It was the idea of transparency that kind of came up in the beginning of the conversation with David, and how I mean, this isn't what you were saying, David, but in your telling of how transparency works, it's been my experience that it doesn't seem to work very well for farmers or for producers. Like it seems to be a really one way benefit for the buyers to ask for transparency and then use that information kind of against making some decisions. And so I think that a lot of times producers are taking on that responsibility and thinking that if I play the game, if I'm transparent, I'm going to win. But it ends up kind of being weaponized against them more often than not. I think obviously some people win, but the more common path is that, I don't know. So I'm just like, it's hard to say that I'm not a fan of transparency, but it's just like a failed experiment. I haven't seen it be particularly successful for the people that it says it's supposed to be helping. That's just some nighttime thoughts.
I think the transparency is a double-edged sword for sure. Like there is times when your honesty and transparency, all it serves to do is come back and bite you in a way that by the actual quality of the coffee, it shouldn't. But as soon as they know something and they think something, then they taste something. And so there's a lot of that goes on. But I would say we've noticed the transparency side of it being valued, not in the individual sale, but when you build a culture of transparency, there's also a measure of loyalty and trust that is built into the relationship with our consistent year over year buyers. So it's not going to help us in the individual sale, but it will help us over the years because the people we sell our coffee to now, none of them ever ask for samples because we've been so completely honest about everything and it's been consistent. And so it's just based on trust now. And I think that's because they've seen the transparency, so they feel like there's nothing we're hiding because there is nothing we're hiding. Mm-hmm. But there's also another side to the transparency that we've valued all along, and that is transparency for the farmer, because that's one of their biggest struggles. Is coffee it's a black box. They get rid of the parchment. They don't know why the price is what it is. They don't know who's getting the money. They just see that the coffee goes out from them. It goes somewhere and everybody else makes money and I feel like I don't. So all along, one of our values has been communicating transparency to the farmers. So we tell them why we're buying at the price we're buying, which is always above parchment market price. We're generally, we've been as high as 100% above market price for coffee, but we're always at least 30% above the market price because we're asking people to pick ripe cherry. But we tell them what the price is. We explain economic, like how does the price of coffee go up? How does it go down? What is it? And so it's helping bring transparency for them at what the process is. So they don't feel like, because generally they just feel like everybody's taking advantage of them. And often nobody is. They're not actually being taken advantage of. They're just watching market pressures of supply and demand and prices. But without being able to see through and have the transparency of what that is, it feels like somebody's taken advantage of me. So that's actually been a huge part of it, is our transparency with what we do for the farmers. So we can explain from your coffee, this is what we do. These are our margins. These are our processes. This is what it takes to get coffee to an export country. This is how long it takes. This is how long before the money comes back to you. And it's opened their eyes in a huge way that helps them understand the world around them without feeling like somebody's just taking advantage of me. So I think while there are definite downsides and frustrations with transparency where you're like, I was transparent and it only hurt me and didn't help anything, we're still committed to it because of the other ways in which we see it. It benefits both the farmer and it benefits the long-term relationships with buyers.
No, I really appreciate that point, and I think you're right. When there's a vacuum, it's so easy for us to fill it with our imaginations, and usually with something negative about imagining what's happening, behind the curtain. I think what you're speaking to is something that is so rare, and I would love for it to be more normalized in our industry. That transparency it's like a one-way arrow, right? So we often, as producers, what is your cost of production and what are you paying your workers and all of this information. And then that gets pushed out to the consumer. But a lot of times for the producer, we don't know what a roaster's charging, what are their margins, what are they paying their people. I feel like it should be fair to say, okay, I'm going to share with you what I do. You share with me what you do. I want to know why you're pricing it this way. And it's just so taken for granted that oh, you don't need to know that. We need to know that from you, but you don't need to know what we're doing. And again, I don't think it's malicious. I don't think people are being taken advantage of. It's just like so unconscious that this is the way that it is. And I would just love for more people to kind of push back and say, sure, yeah, I'll tell you my cost of production. Tell me yours and tell me your margin. And what do you pay your baristas? I don't know. Just not to necessarily do anything with that information, but just to signal that when I'm giving you my information, that there's a value to that, and that there is something to be learned, and that can flow both ways. So I just, yeah, would love for that to be a little bit more normal. I don't know what you guys think.
And I just want to echo that 100% agree with the things that David said. It's exactly the same value that, because transparency to me is one of the, transparency and traceability is one of the most important parts of being able to distinguish what we do from, what anybody else is doing. And so the other thing I would say is, because we try and market that coffee from an individual farmer, which is different than aggregating the coffees, we're able to, roasters bring that bag of coffee back to the farmer, or, you can show them pictures of their coffee with their name on the bag, and the marketing. And I think that is a way in which the transparency flows back to the farmer, and the farmer feels respected, and valued when they see their name on a bag, and see that somebody's taking care of their product all the way, to the end, as opposed to, taking it down the street, dropping it off at the bodega, and that's the end of your coffee. And so I see the value in transparency. I also see how it can go wrong, and Lucia, when we do our technology project, which, it always takes longer than it should, and it's a struggle, but that's what I say in our meetings of what data we're collecting. I ask for that information from the roasters, and we publish that information. What are your costs of production? What are your costs after, for roasting and things like that? And all of that stuff has been published when we publish, the transparency data, not just the farmers. And the reason I say, I don't know whether consumers care or don't care, but there's got to be equity in who's sharing data. And so at a minimum, we all have to share the data. How it actually affects the sale of coffee, I don't know, but there's got to be equity and information.
Well, I think that's been one of the problems with it, is that it's been driven by trying to sway consumers and convince consumers to pay more for coffee. So it's been very consumer and very forward facing, when that information would just be good for the industry to have. It would be good to understand where money's going and be able to, ask questions. But unless there was a case for it, of will people care? Can I put it on my website? Will it help me make sales? If people think, no, it won't, then they won't do it. Whereas I think it's just good practices. It would just be good to have this information, because otherwise, like what we were talking about before, you have a vacuum, and we can just fill it with all kinds of ideas and all kinds of, prejudices about what could be happening and where the money's going. And I know that we've felt that way, because we know our cost of production and what we're giving our coffee for, and then you just kind of see it randomly out in the ether, and we're just okay, well, that's 1.5 times, where did that even come from? And just not being able to have an idea, we can just start to feel kind of frustrated about the levels of money on different parts of the chain. Sometimes feel very intense, and we felt it a lot when this trip to Europe. Part of it that was a little extra sting is because we weren't just visiting these, we were seeing people that we know, so we were sitting down with the business owners, and it was kind of trying to have a conversation with business owner to business owner and how difficult it can be. And they're like, hey, yeah, we have tough days, and having a business isn't easy anywhere. There are always challenges. And I didn't say this, but it was yeah, but your challenges are I had a bad meeting, or it was hard for me to imagine the kind of challenges that they were talking about versus when a storm comes in and takes out half your farm, or when it doesn't rain for 6 months and you're seeing everything like wither and die. And I'm like, your challenges are not the same as these challenges. Like they're kind of talking about how like everything is like comparable, and it just didn't feel right to say sure everybody struggles. Like the levels that we're talking about feel really different. And this isn't just to complain. It was more this idea of if there was more information about how the rest of the chain works, I think it just helps people on this end feel a little bit better to know, yeah, of course, they're not making that much money. Things cost. There's a lot of different steps. There's a lot of things that they have to do. Sure. But imagining it is different from having that data, that little saying like we can have it, we can connect it. It just hasn't been a priority at all to have this information available. So anyway, rant over.
That's actually one of the hardest things about running a business where you live. Like, I know all the people who work for me. I know where they live. I know how much that extra dollar means to them. Where the dollar for me also means something, but the dollar for the roaster, in real terms, when you're talking about the $500,000 build out, the couple extra dollars wouldn't make any difference to them, but makes a huge difference here. And so I've watched that make it much harder to make a profit because my costs are too high, because I want my employees to have that money. I have this perpetual issue when we sort coffee. We don't have a big dry mill. We do our own dry milling, and all our coffee is hand sorted by ladies in the community. And so we set a per kilo amount that they get paid. So for every kilo of clean coffee that you give me, you get paid this amount. Works great. We set it wanting them to get an above average wage. It turns out they were very motivated by the per kilo thing. So they are making like 1.5 days wages in 4 hours because they're good at what they do and they're just firing through it. Well, then you look at that, it's like, I'm paying you way too much because you're getting more than anybody else in your family works for like a day and a half, and you're only doing it for 4 hours. So clearly I'm overpaying. I can pull that back down and then have a decent, but then I start looking at, wait a second, you're working hard for that money. You need it more than I do. Okay, you know what? I'm going to pay a ridiculous amount for sorting. But that's the difference of the average going wage here for 4 hours day labor would be about $4 for 4 hours. So I'm paying them like $12 for the 4 hours if they're really doing well. It's like, okay, $12 for 4 hours at the consumer end, that's still forced labor. Like that's not at, that's nobody's getting rich at $12 for 4 hours. But here they feel like they are making bank. They're so excited. It's like, okay, I'm going to keep all of what I pay for coffee, what I pay my employees, all of those things. I'm going to stop worrying about it being too high, because all of that is money that's going directly into the pockets of the community that needs it. And I would rather try and pass that cost onto the consumer who it doesn't hurt them nearly as bad. So it's not a way to take advantage of the consumer. It's a way to, in a good way, get more value from them and pass it into the community as the middleman. Because the farmer and the employee here, they can't set the price for the consumer at the end. I can. So it's actually a way that I can pull a little bit extra, not for me, but actually for the community who's doing all the work and who is undervalued. So that's kind of an interesting side of being the middleman producer, is you can overpay intentionally and then pass that cost on, because you're not just running it at market values. Market values always pushes to the bottom, and I want to hold an artificial bottom that's at a better height than where the market would actually want to go.
I love this guy. Yeah.
Not a great way to make money, though.
You know what, though? But we live in the community, too. And, way back when we started, and, the farmer's 9-year-old daughter is now, 20-something. And she just went to Turkey for a master's degree. It's like, people don't do that where I live. And so to see, and I don't know I don't like it when people like overvalue because I bought their coffee, they have electricity and a roof on their house. It's not that dramatic, but you start to wonder, it's like because you did this business and because they had disposable income and because their kids were then able to get more education, and now she's in Turkey. And I just think that's because I live in the community, I get to know that information, and the same thing. We pay women to sort coffee, and it keeps getting more and more and more expensive. But it's like, man, I don't want to pay for some piece of machinery when I can pay a human being who's going to then get ahead somehow, right? Even though I say it's not get ahead money. That's why people immigrate to the United States. They're looking for get ahead money. And the living wage here is not get ahead money.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, like here, they get paid $10 a day, roughly, in this region for 8 hours or more of work, depending on the time of year. So if we're talking during harvest, these guys are working probably 12-hour days. Mm-hmm. $10 a day for all that hard work, it's nothing.
Well, and one of the most like egregious examples that we saw in Copenhagen, like food was way beyond what
the place is nuts.
The place is insane. It was like $10 for like a croissant. But there was one place that we went to that was not a coffee shop. It was a pottery studio, but they also served coffee because people are going to do pottery, and they had a little board for their coffee drinks so that you could get a coffee. And then I saw that, well, it wasn't that they had like a coffee shop. It was that they had one of those like Nespresso pod machines, and you could get like on their sandwich board, and it was like $5 or $6 for like a Nespresso pod.
Cappuccino.
For a cappuccino from this machine. And I was just like, they're so disconnected from this, consuming this type of coffee and what it took to like prepare this work. So anyway, I just love your guys' examples of actually making a difference in the community, because I think that's something that's really exciting about coffee, is that it's so global that we get to have impact. Like, it's a fun way to have impact. There's many ways to have impact, but this happens to be a delicious, fun way to do it. And I feel maybe like David was saying, this double-edged sword. Like there's a really wonderful part about telling these stories because they're true, and it's nice to be able to feel like you're making a difference. But on the other side, another place that we visited in Copenhagen was messaging. Their branding is very much about look at us and like
we did a
helping
thing.
But it was like the way that they were doing it, for me, I find it really difficult to swallow, because it is very centering. It's very like, look at me, what I'm doing, look at us and how awesome we are, instead of being more about like, here's impact, here are the things. Like, it was just a very egocentric way to present information about, like, I don't know, I found it really difficult. Good.
It's egocentric, but they're focusing the marketing on the producer that they buy from and how much they pay them. So they would have illustrations of the producers plastered on the doors and windows of the cafes and showing next to their name, like, we paid them 70% above market rate or something absurd like that. And it's like, but are you paying the producer for their face on the door? Are you paying them to use them as a marketing tool?
Well, and I think it was also still very divorced. Like, it was like, yeah, we pay 70% above, but we...
Like, the market rate's bullshit anyway.
The market rate's pretty bad, so I don't know that they're actually making, again, a living wage and all of the other things that we talk about. Like, just because it's more than somebody else, it may not be enough in that community, because the cost of living is very different in all of our countries and from all of the different circumstances. So the point is,
the other thing too is when you're pasting the picture of a person who makes more money than God as a coffee farmer because they have 300 hectares, and and you're like, oh look, we're paying the poor farmer. I'm like, that guy went to Texas A&M.
So that guy's wearing a Rolex.
And he picked me up in a Mercedes SUV, and he's got a house on the volcano lake. It's like, I'm buying coffee from only rich people, and then I'm going to brag about how I paid them more money so they have electricity and water. But it's like, I mean, I don't want to like out any of the brands in the United States, but there's one brand where it's like they're all transparent and everything, but what's clear is they buy coffee from rich estate owners in places like Colombia and Brazil and and Ecuador, and it's like they're not buying from people who are trying to get ahead. They're buying from people who have always benefited from the system
They were born
that
ahead.
exists.
Yeah, they were born ahead.
Yeah, I know those guys exist in Guatemala,
Oh yeah.
right? And so and it's less in Honduras, but El Salvador and Guatemala are places where there's some very rich coffee farmers. And so, yeah, you see that
That's
picture of the guy plastered on the door, and you're like, wait a minute, I know that guy.
that's
He's
one of
got
the
a
nice
really
things
nice
about
car.
Indonesia. Indonesia doesn't really have that. Coffee farmers tend to be, you have 1 hectare, maybe 2 hectares if you're doing well. Everybody in the community has just a tiny bit, and there's no estate, there's nothing, anything like that. So it's all directly the person who's growing it lives in the community. I wanted to mention on the transparency side, I think you were talking about the fact that you can look at what other people are doing, and you see, you don't know how to value what they're doing. And I think it's something that's come out of a social media generation where you see what the good that other people have, but you don't see what it took to get that, or the bad other side of that same thing. So I've been able to do that kind of for the roaster side of it, when they have this idyllic view of growing coffee on the mountainside, and wandering out into the beautiful mountainside, and picking ripe cherries. Have you ever tried picking cherries? I picked all morning and I got 5 kilos. Like, and I fell 7 times and it was miserable. And there's ants on everything. There's leeches. And it's like, you don't understand what it means to pick 6 kilos of cherry to get 1 kilo of green bean that you roast happily. So roaster side, you don't understand what you're talking about with the farmer. At the same time, the farmer often doesn't understand some of the things that the producer or the roaster have in their context. So because wet hulled here, it's based on, nobody has capital, so you're just turning over the coffee as fast as you can. They're buying it, they're getting it dried, they're selling it, getting the money back, and using that to buy more coffee just constantly. So we buy coffee all season and then sell it at the end of the season. So we need this massive amount of capital as compared to anybody else locally, because we're stockpiling coffee, paying salaries, paying all of that, and then at the end of the season you sell it. So when I explain to people that when we export, that means we put our coffee in a container, we send it in September, and often March or April of the next year is when we're finally getting the payment for that coffee. They understand, oh, it's not just that you're getting so much money for the coffee. There's some other things that I had no idea about. So our price might be 50% above what they see other people selling coffee for. And they're like, man, I'd love to get that. And they say, okay, are you willing to have enough capital, find enough capital, and then wait 8 or 9 months before it gets back to you, and all of the costs of shipping. So once you explain what a really good roaster costs, what the rent is on the Copenhagen thing, it can be a good eye-opening experience as well for the farmer to be like, oh, I just saw the top line that they're selling a bag of coffee for $25 and the rest must be profit. It's like, oh, no. There is so much that went into that. And the way that all becomes okay is when you have enough relationship where you see, okay, they're selling it for $25 a coffee, but this are all the other costs. So their actual margin is this on that 25, whereas my margin was this on the, okay. So you have to have the relationship enough to see both the good and the bad, the things that balances out the process. But everybody kind of keeps their part a little bit quiet, and all they're willing to show is the high end of theirs. So we're all just judging each other off of the high end, or sometimes if you want people to feel bad for you, your low end without talking about the high end. So the transparency and relationship, it's the key to everything, but it's hard to do that at scale.
I think that's a really good point. I also, the other thing as we wrap up, David, that you mentioned that I wanted to circle back to is the paying so much more for that amount of work that the women are doing in your community. It reminded me of a podcast recommendation I wanted to give you guys. It's called Acquired. So it's a business podcast, and they're long. They're like 3-hour episodes, but they're fantastic. And there was one recent episode about chocolate, the Mars company. And Mars, so it's a story of like Hershey's and Mars, and how Mars had a, what's it called? Like a guideline, a principle that they will always pay 3 times more whatever their competitors are paying for wages, because they needed to keep the people and they needed to like retain talent. And so whatever anyone else was paying, whatever Hershey's was paying, Mars paid 3 times more kind of across the board, whether you were a janitor, an HR admin, or their like whatever. So it was a really interesting, and Mars is freaking huge. And so they credited kind of keeping their people, having like that, the experience, and like the people, their employees would stay on for like 30 years. Like they had such a low turnover rate. So they kind of credit a lot of that, talent retention to their, overall success. So anyway, I really recommend at least that episode. There's some other interesting ones like IKEA, like how the story of IKEA or the story of like Home Depot. But the one about Mars and chocolate is super interesting. So anyway, wrapping up, does anyone else that didn't get to say anything want to a last minute comment before we log off?
I think I want to jump in. I think coffee is just one element in community life. So the way we treat coffee in here, we're trying to connect people who get money and capital to the local community. So it's not just about coffee. So maybe in Indonesia we can sell tenun. Tenun is a ethnic fabric, so they can produce it every month. They don't really scared to sell it because of the weather, of the climate change. They can survive with the tenun itself. So we're trying to connect people with the coffee. So the coffee is just an item to unlock the relationship between the one who gets money and the one who needs the money. So yeah, I think I'm really proud of the thing that I'm working now. So we don't really focusing on the money from the coffee, but the money that can community get from the people who get money. So yeah, I think coffee is really cool thing to unlock those relationships between the local farmers and the one who get the capital.
That's a really great comment to close us out. Thank you. And I think that's also something that I love about this community, and why it's just so nice to hop on here every now and then, even virtually hang out, is remembering the people that are behind coffee and hearing the different stories. And so I want to thank you guys for spending your Monday, your Thursday, Monday. I wanted to say morning because it's our night, for spending whatever morning, afternoon time it is for you with us. And yeah, good to see some new faces. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
Really enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thanks, Lowell.